Red Bull tried to hide this completely. No announcement. No cameras. No warning to the paddock. But after just one secret test at Silverstone, Verstappen revealed what really happened inside the RB22. And it's bigger than anyone expected. A car that was nearly half a second too slow, carrying around 20 kilograms of extra weight, so unpredictable that even Verstappen couldn't understand it. And then suddenly, in just 200 kilometers, everything starts to change. Not the speed, the behavior, the control. So the real question is not what Red Bull upgraded. It's what Verstappen felt in that car that finally made it make sense. It did not look like a breakthrough. Not at first. No dramatic lap times. No obvious visual changes. Nothing that would make headlines on its own. But that is exactly why what Verstappen revealed matters so much. Because what really happened at Silverstone was not visible. It was felt. And that is where everything begins to shift. Because before this test, the RB22 had one defining problem. It made no sense. Corner to corner, it behaved differently. Lap to lap, it changed. One moment the front would bite, the next it would wash out completely. And when a driver feels that, he stops trusting the car. He hesitates. Just slightly. But in Formula 1, that hesitation costs everything. And that is exactly what Verstappen had been dealing with. Even he could not push at 100% because the car would not respond consistently. But then comes Silverstone. A controlled environment. Limited distance. Just 200 kilometers, enough to feel changes, but not enough to hide problems. And suddenly, something is different. Not perfect. Not complete. But different enough for Verstappen to notice immediately. And here is the key. He did not talk about speed. He talked about behavior. The car starts to respond. Predictably. Consistently. And that tells you something fundamental has changed. Because predictability does not come from small upgrades. It comes from alignment. From systems working together, instead of against each other. And this is where the first visible clue appears. The front wing. Those small elements on the end plates. Easy to ignore. But incredibly important. Because they control how air flows around the front tires. Reducing turbulence. Stabilizing the airflow into the rest of the car. And here is the critical detail. Every other team already had them. Red Bull did not, until now. So this is not innovation. This is correction. Fixing a limitation that had been there from the start. But that alone does not explain what Verstappen felt. Because front wing changes do not transform a car's behavior on their own. Something deeper is happening. And this is where everything connects. The weight problem. Around 20 kilograms above the minimum. That forced Red Bull into compromises. Removing aerodynamic load. Simplifying components. Sacrificing performance just to make the car manageable. Which means the RB22 we saw in the first races was not the real car. It was a restricted version. A compromised version. And Silverstone was the first time Red Bull started to reverse that. Reducing weight. Rebalancing the car. Reintroducing aerodynamic elements. And when you do that, everything changes. The front becomes sharper. The mid-corner becomes stable. The rear becomes predictable. And suddenly, the car starts to make sense. That is what Verstappen revealed. Not a faster car. A clearer one. But here is where things become dangerous. Because when you reconnect all these systems, you also bring back their sensitivity. More aerodynamic load means more dependence on airflow. More dependence means less tolerance for error. And that creates a new risk. Because now the car might be better, but also more fragile. More exposed when conditions are not perfect. And this is why Silverstone only tells part of the story. Because everything there is controlled. No traffic. No dirty air. No race pressure. Miami will be the opposite. And what Verstappen felt will be tested in a way that cannot be controlled. Because if that new predictability survives, then Red Bull has found the direction they needed. But if it does not, then what happened at Silverstone was not a solution. It was just the first moment where the car felt right, before reality challenges it again. But this is where everything becomes unpredictable again. Because what Verstappen experienced at Silverstone was controlled. Carefully controlled. Clean air. Consistent laps. No external pressure. And that hides the real problem. Because Formula 1 cars do not race in isolation. They fight. They follow. They react to everything around them. And the moment that happens, everything changes. Dirty air becomes the first challenge. The moment the RB22 sits behind another car, airflow is disrupted. The front loses precision. The balance shifts. The stability Verstappen just started to feel begins to fade. And that is exactly where this new system gets tested the hardest. Because this upgrade is not built to be forgiving. It is built to be precise. Every airflow channel, optimized. Every component, dependent on the others. Which means when everything is perfect, the car feels incredible. But when it is not, the same system can become unstable again. And this is not just theory. We have already seen the warning signs. Japan. A race where the problem was not just pace. It was survival. A cooling issue forced Verstappen to lift. Not because he was slow, but because the car could not handle the stress. And that reveals something critical. This car is operating very close to its limits. Closer than most teams would ever accept. So now imagine adding more aerodynamic load. More complexity. More dependence on perfect airflow. That does not reduce the risk. It increases it. And this is why Miami becomes the real turning point. Because Miami does not allow control. It introduces chaos. Heat. High track temperatures. Long runs where every weakness starts to appear. And that is where the RB22 will either hold together, or fall back into the same pattern. Unpredictable. Difficult. Impossible to trust. And this leads to something even deeper. Because what Verstappen revealed was not just about the car. It was about direction. Red Bull is no longer making small adjustments. They are committing to a philosophy. A concept built on extreme efficiency, extreme precision, extreme risk. And that kind of philosophy does not give you gradual results. It gives you extremes. Either a breakthrough, or a failure that is impossible to hide. And that is why this moment matters so much. Because if this system works under pressure, Red Bull does not just improve. They transform. But if it does not, then what Verstappen revealed at Silverstone was not the answer. It was just the moment before everything gets exposed. And now, everything comes down to the moment Red Bull cannot control anymore. Because up until Silverstone, they were reacting, fixing problems, patching weaknesses, trying to understand a car that never behaved the same way twice. But what Verstappen revealed changes that completely. Because for the first time, there is direction. Not certainty, but direction. And in Formula One, that is everything. Because once a team understands where the problem comes from, they stop guessing. They start building. And that is exactly what Silverstone gave them. Not a perfect car, but a reference. A version of the RB22 that finally behaves in a way that makes sense. And that allows something critical to happen. Real development. Because before this, every upgrade was a risk. Add performance, and you might break balance. Fix balance, and you might lose speed. Everything was disconnected. But now, those elements are starting to align. And that is what Verstappen showed, without saying it directly. The car is no longer fighting itself. At least, not in those conditions. But here is where the pressure becomes brutal. Because once you find direction, you have to commit to it. And committing means something very simple. There is no easy way back. Because the changes Red Bull is making are not small. They are structural. Weight distribution. Aerodynamic balance. Cooling layout. Everything tied together. And once you move in that direction, you cannot just reverse it in one race. Which means Miami is not just a test. It is a commitment. A moment where Red Bull puts everything on one path and accepts the consequences. And this is where Verstappen becomes even more important. Because now, he is not just driving. He is validating the entire concept. Every lap he completes, every corner he attacks, every piece of feedback he gives, determines whether this direction continues or collapses. And that is an enormous responsibility. Because if he feels confidence, the team pushes forward. If he feels instability, everything slows down again. And that is the tension behind this entire story. Because what Verstappen revealed was not a solution. It was a signal. A signal that the car is finally starting to make sense. But in Formula One, understanding the car is only the beginning. The real challenge is proving that understanding holds under pressure. Lap after lap, race after race. And that is something Silverstone could never answer. Only Miami can. Because when the lights go out, and the RB22 is surrounded by other cars, pushed beyond controlled conditions, forced to react in real time, that is when the truth finally appears. Either everything Verstappen felt was the start of something real, or it was just the first moment of clarity, before the chaos returns. And that is the reality Red Bull is about to face. And when that moment finally arrives, everything simplifies. No more theories. No more controlled tests. No more hidden variables. Just truth. Because Formula One has a way of exposing reality faster than anything else. One lap in qualifying, and you already know. Not from the timing screens. From the car itself. The way it turns. The way it holds the apex. the way the driver commits or hesitates. And this is where the final piece of what Verstappen revealed becomes clear. Because what he showed at Silverstone was not just that the car improved. It was that he started to trust it. And that changes everything. Because trust is what allows a driver to go beyond the limit. Late on the brakes. Earlier on the throttle. Carrying speed into corners where hesitation used to exist. That is where lap time truly comes from. Not just engineering, but confidence. And if that confidence is real, if it survives the chaos of a race weekend, then Red Bull does not just recover. They jump forward. Suddenly. Violently. The kind of jump that reshapes the entire grid. But if that trust breaks, even once, everything collapses back. Because a driver who loses confidence, even slightly, never fully commits again. And in a car as sensitive as the RB22, that is enough to lose everything. Which brings us to the final truth behind what really happened at Silverstone. It was not a solution. It was a moment. A moment where, for the first time this season, the car and the driver were finally speaking the same language. And that is powerful, but also fragile. Because that connection has to survive pressure, heat, dirty air, fatigue, an entire race distance where nothing stays consistent. And that is something no test can replicate. So now, everything depends on what happens when that connection is pushed to its absolute limit. Because if it holds, then what Verstappen revealed was the beginning of a comeback. A real one. Built on understanding, not guesswork. But if it breaks, then Silverstone was something else entirely. Not the answer. Just the first time the car made sense, before the reality of Formula One forces it to prove it can stay that way. And when that moment comes, there will be no doubt left. Only one answer. Either Red Bull finally unlocked the RB22, or they only uncovered how fragile it really is.